Sheep Show 2026 in Reno is almost here and registration is open. Sign up, book your hotel, and browse the schedule at wildsheepfoundation.org. Full registration gets you into the draw for a heavyweight sheep camp gear package worth over $10,000. Make sure you're there January 22nd to 24th for the biggest mountain hunting and conservation event of the year. If Reno isn't in the cards, the Wild Sheep Society of BC's Salute to Conservation and Mountain Hunting Expo is set for February 26 to 28 in Penticton. Details at wildsheepsociety.com. And check out our friends at North Arm Knives. From kitchen knives to hunting blades, they've got you covered from the field to the butcher block. Visit northarmknives.com. Hey guys, welcome to episode 191. Very excited to welcome back Jesse Zeman to the podcast. It's been a long time since I chatted with him. If you've been listening to the podcast for a long time, that's a name you've heard many, many times. But if you're new, and I know a lot of you are, Jesse Zeman is with the BC Wildlife Federation. And he's a guy that we have a great deal of respect for. He's been extremely helpful to us since we started hunting and since we started the podcast nearly 10 years ago. Jesse was one of the first guests, and he takes a very calculated approach to difficult topics, such as grizzly bears. And because there's so many new listeners still finding the podcast, and because he was such a big help in helping us understand bears, black bears and grizzly bears in the province, I thought it'd be great to bring him back on and inform some of you new guys about what's going on, how we got to where we are today, and what the best path forward might be. So let's get into the episode. Sit back, relax, crack a nice cold beer, and enjoy episode 191 with Jesse Zeman. Jesse Zeman, how you doing, brother?
Doing well, Mike.
Good.
You?
Good, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah, it's been a bit. So
I think you still hold the record, though, for appearances on the show.
That's funny. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. How's life, dude? It's been a while since we caught up. I want to talk to you about fires. That's a whole other podcast, but how are you and the family doing? You're rebuilding and get yourself settled there? Or?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah, we got back in September, I guess, of this year. So just over 2 years and still a bit of a construction zone. But it's sure nice to be back on the property and back into a house. Yeah.
Okay. We'll definitely dedicate a whole podcast to that because I got lots of questions. But we're going to chat about grizzly bears today. And it's a big topic right now in BC. And I mean, it's kind of making headlines all over the world, really. But I wanted to sort of do this episode for people who are just getting into hunting and learning about conservation and what all this means and how we got here. But first question, man, what is it about bears? Why is this always such a heated debate?
Yeah. Sometimes we say anything with eyelashes, I guess, raises controversy. Grizzly bears have kind of been fodder, I would say, for a long time for folks in BC. And then the conception or misconception around trophy hunting has been another piece. And so, there's a lot of moving parts. I would say there's a lot of people that care about grizzly bears, but there's a lot of people that view grizzly bears in different ways for different reasons. Right. So, even around, predators or large carnivores, generally what you find all over the world looking at economics when they do cost benefits analysis is like, there's the people who live with them and are impacted by them. And then there's people who don't. And usually what you find is the people who live in urban centers with a lot of population, they're generally on average more wealthy, better educated. They kind of tell the people in rural areas kind of how to live their life. And so
Right.
there's kind of a regressive policy around this. And on one side of the spectrum too, as it relates to people and their feelings about wildlife or carnivores or hunting, you have one extreme where it's like, I don't ever want to see anybody ever harvest an animal or shoot an animal or kill an animal. And then on the flip side, you get people on the other end of the spectrum who are like, I never want to see a bear on this landscape.
Right.
So there's a conversation between all of those goalposts, I guess.
Yeah. That's actually a point I wanted to bring up near the end of the conversation, but I watched your interview on CBC and you said something similar. It was something along the lines of, we don't want people to be terrified to go outside. We also don't want to kill every bear out there. We want to be somewhere in the middle, which I think is a great way to look at it. We can't be on either side of the spectrum. We definitely have to land somewhere in the middle, and landing there isn't always an easy task either.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah. That's kind
Yeah.
of the world we live. That's the world we live in nowadays, right? It's it's hard. Like you're either on one side of, you're in one tribe or the other, and you can't be in both, or you can't go, I like this about this policy, but I don't like that. It's like, you have to be completely opposed or completely in support of it. So.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned trophy hunting, and the grizzly bear hunt always gets classified as a trophy hunt. Do you think that's a fair way to classify it?
Yeah, and I feel like we talked about this too when you guys were first starting up and kind of getting going, and I think that society's view writ large is really like shooting an animal and only taking the antlers or the horns or the hide. And we've been talking about this for years. Like, we use the whole grizzly bear. Bear meat is bear meat is bear meat. And I've probably said this on your podcast too. And we just picked some up, actually.
Oh, nice.
Some bear hams. It's one of our favorite meats at the house. The girls just love it. And so, as it related to grizzly bears, we used the whole animal. And that was something that, it was proposed as a regulation quite a few times. It never went by. There was a lot of kind of political uncertainty or inability to make decisions, but that makes it convenient. That makes it convenient to be talked about. There was a lot of footage, and we've talked about social media stuff a lot and how people could and maybe should use their social media to tell the whole story about what goes into hunting. There was a lot of that before the hunting was stopped. And, so, a large part of this is just being aware of how hunting and hunters' behaviors reflect on us as a group, and how the public perceives that when they don't know the whole story or what goes into being a hunter or a conservationist, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
All those things.
Yeah, you've as you said, you're kind of a big part of our bear journey, and what we were new to hunting, the bear thing for us was confusing, and we didn't know where we stood on it. And now, like you said, man, it's one of my favorite things to eat. And like Garrett's kids absolutely love it. Kelly's kid loves it. And anyone who tries is like, holy shit, this is good, man. Like, I didn't even think you could eat these things. So you definitely helped us with that. And I don't know. I think, like you said, the more you tell the story, the more you get other people involved and share your harvest with people. It makes a big difference. Obviously, you can't do that for everybody, but it certainly helps. But let's go back a little bit, and you touched on some of this already. The hunt was closed in 2017, right?
Yeah, it's 2017 right? Or 2018. Yeah, I don't have a perfect.
So what led up to the decision? I mean, you and I both know, but explain it anyways.
Yeah, I mean, in BC, it was literally decades in the media, and it started with there's not enough bears, there's uncertainty in bear populations, there's uncertainty in bear harvest. There was the science, my data versus your data, went on for decades,
right?
And that that it's really easy for the public to be confused, especially when one side is saying there's not enough to do this and the other side is saying it's sustainable. They're going to err to one side. Like I said, there was a lot of social media. There was a lot of hype. The discussion about hunting, up to that point, our world has changed dramatically, even with the BCWF now. 10 years ago or 8 years ago, when the phone rang from a reporter, it was to talk about wolves or bears all the time. Public publicity, like positive publicity for hunting, was not part of the discussion. Quite frankly, like hunters, like we were getting hammered and roasted by the media pretty much the whole time. And so it's changed, right? Like you tons and tons of interviews and tons of discussion in the media, and, telling the story of hunters and conservation, meaning, there's areas where we think grizzly bears should be hunted, but there's also areas where there are no grizzly bears, and grizzly bear reintroduction is part of the discussion, or recovery is part of the discussion. And so that's changed. And even, last month in November, we had a couple of our young members, female members of the BCWF, who were featured on the front page of the Vancouver Sun and the Province. Literally front page of the big newspaper in, downtown, like that's the Lower Mainland, downtown Vancouver, which is suburbia for us, right? So that conversation has changed, but at that time it was very negative. There was a lot of stuff that came off of people's social media and YouTube, where, hunters were, I would say, giving fodder to people who wanted hunting shut down. And so, there was a lot of support from a pile of people in British Columbia, especially in the Lower Mainland. And that's going to continue even now. There's no, for a lot of those folks, you're not going to change their mind. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it is they're never going to interact with grizzly bears, right?
I think that should be mandatory. If you want to have an opinion, you should sleep in a tent where there's grizzly bears all over the place. So you might change your opinion a little bit.
Yeah. There's a very different perspective when you're not interacting, and that perspective is also very. And it happens in rural environments too. It's also very one way, right? It's like grizzly bears are always bad or grizzly bears are always good. And there's a place where it's like, there's bears that live their life without conflict and avoid people and make good decisions. And there's also bears that are like a pain in the butt that will get inside of your wall tent or break into your house, rip the front door off your house. And they will do it regularly because they've been conditioned or habituated or whatever led to that, or taught by mom. So again, I guess there's a lot of similarities between people and grizzly bears, but as related to grizzly bear hunting, I think, hunters largely didn't do a great job at telling the story, didn't do a great job on their social media. And you're dealing with a province where, kind of like 90+% of the population lives in a very small part of the province that has very little interaction with wildlife. So a lot of these experiences are unrelatable to them.
Right. When you see opposition to it, people will cling on to saying that the bears are either threatened or extinct in certain regions, which isn't necessarily false, but they might leave out the part that it's only in certain regions. So people think, wow, these bears are, their numbers are down, they're struggling. But that isn't true for the whole province. So what does it look like across, from the south up to the north as far as numbers go?
Yeah, there's been tons of work. I mean, the reality too, one of the other things that the ban did is it reduced the result. One of the results was less funding for conservation, of course, because there's no grizzly bear hunting and there's no surcharge from the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation. The other piece is that provincially we had 3 staff, 2 PhDs, grizzly bear ecologists in Victoria that both probably had 40 plus years of experience at the time.
Wow.
And those people over time just disappeared. They didn't rehire them. They didn't replace them. And now it's half of one person's time. So the hunting piece of it and the population piece is kind of goes like this. Vancouver Island, very few grizzly bears. Like they've been trying to recolonize. Grizzly bears don't do well around people typically, so they don't typically last. There's probably a handful on the northeast side of the island. The west coast, north of the Lower Mainland. So you get up into Jervis Inlet from there north, like doing pretty good.
Nice.
And the interior coast to Cascades has always been a kind of a spot where we've been trying to do reintroduction. The Stein to Hatlatch, where, we're kind of moving east, has been in trouble for, I want to say 5 decades.
Okay.
You look at the old wildlife reviews in the 1970s, and those populations were struggling. You get into the Cascades, not doing well. The Okanagan, the east side, you're starting to see some recolonization. The Granby, you're getting into more bears, still probably threatened. then as you get into the Kootenays, things get better, and going north from there, like things are generally pretty good. There's not a lot of huge concerns as related to the science. One of the best things that happened in the mid kind of teen 2000s was the Auditor General did a report on the status of grizzly bears, because there was tons of academic, I know this, that, my numbers are better, there's risk of overharvest, there's uncertainty. And the Auditor General's report just basically came out and just said, grizzly bear hunting is not a threat. Habitat loss, habitat fragmentation, food, other mortality sources, those are the problem, right? And so, converting wilderness into parking lots. And now in BC, there's a huge interest in pushing tons of mines in northern BC. Those are problems. Those are problems for grizzly bears. Hunting, as it was applied in the last 20 years, not a threat for grizzly bears.
You might not have this number handy, but with HCTF providing funding that came from species tags and all that, was there a huge dip in funding through that after the ban? Or
you would have had the surcharge on grizzly bear tags, and then that surcharge dried up because it doesn't exist. There's no grizzly bear hunting, so it wouldn't have been huge. It would have been maybe a couple $100,000, but
that's still a big chunk of money, though. Yeah.
Well, those are dollars that disappear. And then a lot of the kind of the long-term work, most of BC's long-term work was done in the southeast corner of BC. So Elk Valley, Flathead, that had been paid for by the Forest Service in large part, and probably the 80s and 90s, big well-funded projects. And it's just kind of petered out. Then now you've got independent researchers, kind of like Clayton Lamb, they're trying to kind of salvage these programs and find money from mining and other resource extraction, and then getting grants where they can. But, the reality is since the hunt, the number of people in headquarters for the government, that's gone way down. They've lost tons of gray matter and knowledge. The funding to do this kind of research that I'm referring to has gone down, and the province has also pivoted to coexistence and education and those sorts of things. And one of the things that everybody's got to kind of think of is when we relocate or translocate bears, or when we're spending money on education, those are good things because we're not killing bears for no reason. But at the same time, there's an opportunity cost in the sense that if we're spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year to take care of individual bears in these communities, what's the opportunity cost, and where could we be spending millions of dollars as it relates to wildlife conservation? So that's another piece that shouldn't get lost on people,
right?
Because there's literally black bears and grizzly bears, there's literally thousands of calls a year that go into this. And when we talk about like that bear that was killed on Texade Island, that bear had already been relocated twice. It had already charged multiple people. It ran some people into the ocean. They had to tread water for like a half hour. They're broken into boats. And still we're throwing resources at this. And so, we're talking about one grizzly bear and probably tens of thousands of dollars being spent on it. And it's like, okay, if we have tens of thousands of dollars to spend, are there better places to spend it?
Yeah, makes sense. When the ban came into effect, you guys predicted that there would be an increase in human bear conflicts. I mean, it's kind of simple math. And that's what we've obviously seen. When did we start to notice an increase?
Yeah. And this is the hard part, is like, there's a lot that goes into this, and there's a lot of unknowns. There's some research that suggests that as it relates to conflict bears, there was some work that was done that showed, kind of bears that end up getting shot by the Conservation Officer Service. The evidence suggests, and none of this is going to be perfect science. The evidence suggests that, mom teaches cubs. If mom's a problem bear and she gets into trouble with people, she's going to teach her cubs if she lives long enough. And if her cubs live long enough, they're going to teach their offspring. And so that was part of that discussion, is like, over time, none of this is overnight in either direction, right? Like whether there's hunting or not hunting, these are learned behaviors. These are slow growing, slow reproducing animals. What we thought is over time, we're going to see increased conflict. The data that we have, provincial data, it increased quite quickly. The number of conflicts increased really fast. The other piece that we really don't have in BC, we don't have the work done because we study bear populations on individual bears. But the other piece is like, we know as it relates to hunting season, for example, when the antlerless white-tailed deer season starts, October 10th, like within about 3 or 4 days, like you're not going to find one of those things standing by the road.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like a landscape of fear. And I mean, there's tons of work on elk. There's a reason why sheep season at the beginning is really good. And everybody wants to be out those first few days because wildlife feels pressure, right? And on the flip side, we know with like urban deer, town deer, let's say when mule deer showed up in Cranbrook or in Kelowna for that matter, like the first deer that set up shop in town wasn't like, there's a dog, I'm gonna kick it to death. Those deer would have been like, that's a dog, that's a predator, I'm going to run away from it. And at some point, a deer turned around and shit kicked somebody's dog and was like, hey, that actually works.
Right.
And then that behavior is probably passed on to future generations of town deer, right? And the same if we stick on town deer, what we also know is when we take town deer, because we tried to translocate them out of Cranbrook and move them up into the bush, a pile of them have no idea how to exist in the wild anymore. Right. So a bunch of those deer that were translocated got killed by cougars like really quick. A bunch of them ended up just getting run over by cars because they were so disoriented.
Right.
Some of them survived. A bunch ended up in a different city causing problems there. So what we're saying here as it relates to behavior is that we think that hunted or intensively hunted populations of bears respond. Whereas if you don't have hunting pressure, the bears are different. And certainly like that's been my experience in BC. Like we've had lots of problems with bears and bear populations, say, for example, north of Revelstoke that have been intensively hunted, not necessarily intensively harvested, but intensively hunted. Like those bears were hard to hunt. Like you are spending long hours behind glass, looking in slides. If you go into a slide and the wind is blowing in the wrong direction, you're never going to see that bear,
right?
Ever. Whereas you can go a few hours south of there in the kind of the boundary country, I'll say, so I don't get in trouble for giving away somebody's hunting spot.
Right.
and those bears like literally follow you around like a dog on a leash. Like you can shoot at their feet and they don't even run away. Like I couldn't, we stopped going to some of these areas because we had so many problems with bears, like literally every time we went there. Right. So there's two pieces, like none of it is like overnight. And then the last piece I'll, mention on that is, this is one thing that Val Geisen, he wasn't like, in his time, the research and the collars and the data was not like it was today, but he basically said, you need to hunt bears inefficiently was his take. And by inefficiently, that means you put hunters out on the landscape. So there's pressure being felt by bears, but you're not harvesting a ton of bears.
Right.
So you have the kind of the sustainability piece and you have the pressure where bears are aware that they're being hunted. And we're not going to have data on that. Like we don't study individual bears. We just don't. And so, there's some work out of Europe where they see some adjustment. And when you talk to the researchers, they definitely talk about individual bears that could not get cubs to survive. And these are bears that were very visible out in the open. And they had other bears that were always like never walked out in a cut block, never walked down a road.
Right.
Like nobody knew they existed, other than being captured and collared. Like they were very secretive bears. And so between those two things, over time, we expected that our relationship kind of with bears would change over time.
Right.
And that's what we feel like we're hearing from people. We're getting lots of engagement from people in Bella Coola, people in Creston, people in the, in East, even in the Elk Valley. And Elk Valley, like definitely we have data there. And a lot of those bears are afraid of people. Like they're not hanging out in the middle of the day, but we feel like we're hearing more and more from our members and members of the public and First Nations in the province that, hey, like things are changing.
Yeah.
Bears that, we would have seen in the past that ran away are now walking towards us.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing, man, because I know you guys have sort of been hearing from a lot of members recently, but we tend to not hear about this stuff until there's like an attack or someone dies. And that's what we've seen this year. But the stuff we don't hear about, there's a ton of that going on, right?
Yeah, that was the unfortunate thing. So like we were actually talking about challenges in bear conflicts the week before the Bella Coola thing happened with the media. And of course, at that time, nobody really wanted to talk about it.
Right.
And then this happened and then everybody wants to talk about it. And so really unfortunate in that sense. But yeah, like what we're hearing from people, and like a lot of these people are, like I said, there's people who don't want to see bears on the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
There's people who don't ever want to see a bear killed. But from some of the folks, like got one of he's a longstanding member from the Creston Valley, and same thing. He said, grizzlies that I first saw was in 99. I was chasing my livestock, so I shot it. He said, and this is he's in his 60s. He's lived there his whole life, right? Grizzly bears started to slowly increase till 2010, then started increasing quickly. Around 2015, they started doing a lot of damage in my certified Timothy fields, digging for mice. So this isn't just like killing livestock. Like now we've got issues in this field digging for mice.
Right.
Had to hire a person to fill the holes by hand. My trail cameras showed up to 10 different bears. About 3 years ago, I saw 8 grizzly bears at one time.
Wow.
When dairymen finish harvesting their corn, they've seen up to a dozen grizzly bears running out of the field. And this is the Creston Valley is not a big valley, right? I mean, you lived really close to there.
Yeah.
In the last 15 years, I never leave the house at night without a good spotlight, my shotgun or rifle, and my dogs, as I've had several instances where I've encountered bears in my yard on my fruit trees. So attraction management comes up.
Yeah.
I've had a couple encounters while I've been working in the fields, and I always carry pepper spray and a gun. 2020, I had a grizzly bear charge me while hunting in the mountains. I shot it and reported it to the Conservation Officer Service. 2 years ago, I was out picking huckleberries near the end of August when a grizzly bear charged me. Luckily, my dog was with me and barked aggressively, stopped the bear at 20 feet. He said, then left. It was a terrifying ordeal. Number of bear encounters and bad incidents are getting out of hand. We've had at least 3 attacks in the valley in the last few years where someone has been seriously injured. Now, a person in the East Guineas has died from complications of a bear attack. Yes, grizzly bear behavior is changing. Numbers are getting out of hand.
Yeah.
And so we're hearing that from like livestock producers, First Nations, our members, clubs, people in Bella Coola are saying literally we're under siege. Local school children were forced to miss recess because there's grizzly bears near the playground. The RCMP, so our version of the police, right? For your US listener, they need supervision just to board the school bus. People's doors being ripped off of their houses, deep freezes ripped out of the houses, residents destroyed. They've had people, I guess, in Bella Coola that have literally just moved out of Bella Coola.
Really?
There's so much conflict. Yeah. And I mean, in all of these stories, there's going to be people who are not managing their garbage, who are not doing right by the bears. But, some of the stuff they're sending in Bella Coola, they've got electric fences set up. They have no attractions in their yard. Everything's in their house. And they're sending pictures of where bears are actually digging underneath the electric fence, breaking into the house, ripping the front door off of the house.
Wow.
So anyways, I mean, these are the things that people are living with. The people in Creston too are saying grizzly bears are charging cars.
That's
and
insane.
We don't let our kids go on picnics. We're not going on, outside. We've got other First Nations who are saying, our kids would normally go out mountain biking, but they don't now because there's so many bears. Now they sit inside and play video games because we don't want them going outside. This is the reality about the way people feel. And there's always 2 sides to this story. There's always ways we can do better and manage attractants. The flip side of that is there are people who used to coexist with grizzly bears just fine or are trying their best, and they're just going, this is too much for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about First Nations too, because that's another thing you see in some of these news articles is they say that they oppose the hunt. And maybe that's true for a certain region. But again, we're not talking about all of British Columbia, right? So what are you hearing there?
Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing that's been used for decades, quite frankly. And a lot of it is nations on the Central Coast, not all, but a lot of them do not support grizzly bear hunting, which is fair and fine, right? That's all good. But yeah, there's been a number of organizations and individuals who have used that as a blanket statement to say First Nation and implying that this is all across the province when it's not. And what we've seen, and I'll let the individual nations speak for themselves, and they are, we've seen nations that were opposed to grizzly bear hunting 10, 12 years ago who now want a licensed grizzly bear hunt.
Right.
So, and that's Southeast BC to Northwest BC, everywhere we're hearing from nations and communities saying this is out of hand. And, not only are they a number of these communities hunting bears, they want to license bear hunt. And that's not always the way it works, right? Around hunting, like there's a lot of times where nations and local people don't want to see licensed hunters out moose hunting.
Right.
But as it relates to grizzly bears, there is serious interest in having a licensed grizzly bear hunt for sure.
So what do you see as like the ideal future as far as grizzly bears goes and bringing back the hunt? What does it look like if you could, paint the perfect picture?
Well, if we could have it, I mean, I think you got to do it all, right? So you're going to need money so you can do inventories and understand what's going on with bears and bear behavior and bear conservation. You're going to need staff and researchers, not just staff. I got to say researchers, people like ecologists that actually have a scientific background, can write up papers, do a good job. You're going to need money for education. You're going to need money to deal with attraction management. There's probably going to be areas where you're going to have to reduce the bear density, like having 30 bears living beside Creston that looks like they're completely habituated to eating corn, killing livestock. Like, I don't feel like that situation. I mean, there's one possibility is, you figure out a way to deal with the livestock issue, right, and those bears might move on, but it seems unlikely given that they have grown up there, lived there for a generation, and are eating corn. And so you got to think through like this Creston or Bella Coola thing. It's like, what's the alternative here? So we can have what we're doing now, which isn't going to work because you're going to end up with people who just go vigilante and just start shooting bears. Like that's an outcome. And you're also going to have people in those communities who refuse to leave their house and won't let their kids go outside. That's also a really bad thing.
Yeah.
We can have under that, we can have education and outreach and some stuff around managing attractants. We can have the conservation officer service remove individual bears. We could add hunting as a layer because then you get the pressure. The worst thing that I think could happen in these communities, especially in the Creston Valley, is we could just end up fencing off everybody's acreage, right? And so the way that valley is structured, similar to the East Kootenays, you just fence off the whole trench. Well, guess what? Like now that, to me, for conservation, that's the worst outcome because now we've completely fragmented the landscape entirely. So I think you try to do everything. You figure out what works. You use it. The thing around using the conservation officer service is it chews up tons and tons of capacity and cash, right? So there's two options here. One is you have the conservation officer go in and try to remove individual bears that are a problem. That costs tons of money. Now we're talking individual animal welfare almost. Or you have hunters who pay to go and do this, but they are not going to be precise in terms of this is the bear in that valley.
Right.
So that's the trade-off that we have to talk about is you don't get precision necessarily if you're going to bring licensed hunters in to try to help, put hunting pressure on or manage a bear population down close to cities. And then as it relates to bears outside of that, the fellow that was, that ended up dying, that was attacked north of Cranbrook, they've got a buddy that was attacked kind of on the other side of the river, I think 7 years ago or 6 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And there was a guy 2 weeks after that person was attacked that ended up getting charged by a sow in the same place that had to shoot the bear.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So this is when you talk to the folks who hunt there, or hunting these Kootenays, they're just I don't even go there anymore.
Yeah.
I've had so many problems with grizzly bears, right? So there's a lot there. There's no silver bullet. It's not hunting's going to fix all of this.
Yeah.
You need to have money, science. We need to do a better job around attracted management.
Yeah.
We talk about bylaws. There's tons of bylaws with municipalities around managing people's garbage. They never enforce them. Very rare that municipalities actually hand out a ticket. So we got to do that because we can't be constantly feeding bears garbage and expecting them to not hang around people's houses. And we think that hunting is part of that solution too, right? So, I would hit it with everything because the alternative is we continue down this road where the conservation officer service has been up in Bella Coola now for 4 weeks,
right?
Multiple people up there. And I think they've captured 8 bears so far. It's the likelihood that they're going to capture the bear that was involved is probably not that great.
Right.
So there's a lot there and there's no solution. Everybody's going to be you got to do this, or you got to do this, or hunting's not. In my mind, you got to set objectives for what you want on the landscape, and then you got to manage for them.
So how do we collectively make that happen? How can people voice their opinions and help make this a reality?
Yeah, that's great. And I think, so one of the pieces is, this is one of the instances where we can collaborate and work really well with First Nations. So that's part of it. And we're working on that, and that's happening. The other piece is, you got to meet with your MLA and talk to them and, and educate them. That's the one thing that has changed, I feel like, is people, hunters and members and people who live in rural communities are just saying, look, we coexisted just fine with grizzly bears before. It's not going fine now.
Yeah.
And so the MLAs are listening to that and are asking questions, which is really good. And so I think just sitting down with MLAs and explaining, what's changed, or if you've seen change and how you've seen change, and talking about what you want to see as a conservationist and as a hunter, I think is really important, because the social value of wildlife is really important. And so social value means like that society actually cares about wildlife. And then, a lot of times like urban deer is kind of one of my least favorite things to talk about,
right?
Because people who have deer beating the hell out of their dog and eating their rose bushes hate deer.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so then they look at it and it's just like, oh, these things are everywhere. Why do I want these? And blah, 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 blah. And let's just get rid of them. And the same applies to bears that get into conflict with communities. Because then people are just like, I don't want these things. I want to get rid of them. And like I said, you have people who are like, I don't want to leave my house. So we got to figure out a way where we can coexist, I guess, is what we're figuring out, where people are not afraid to let their kids go outside. But also where we recognize that, we want bears on the landscape. We just want bears that are not causing a lot of grief. Right. Yeah. And, being able to set objectives for wildlife populations and managing for them, I think is a really appropriate way to have that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool, man. I think we did a pretty good job. Well, you did anyways, of sort of painting a picture of where we started and where we're at. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, we always harp on this. I feel like we talk about every podcast. It's really just a matter of listeners educating their MLAs, right? Like sitting down and not, you don't have to be over the top and be like, oh, there's grizzly, like just talk about your lived experiences and what you've done and what you do and why you do it and why conservation is important, why funding is important. And, cause like I said, we do get, when this was, in the teens in 2015, 17, it was all about trophy hunters and bears and bear hunters. And like the discussion has changed as it relates to hunting. And so, being pragmatic, I think, is really important. And talking about your lived experience is really important, because there's a lot of people who don't ever see a bear. If they see one, it's out of a car window.
Yeah.
And the same is true for a lot of the MLAs. They have no feeling for what it's like to have a grizzly bear walk into your wall tent or chase you or follow you around like a dog. Just no conception. So a bit of reality is good too.
Absolutely. And the only thing I'll add is be mindful of what you say online. Some of the comments I've seen lately, man, it's from hunters. It's not doing us any good. So, think about it before or just don't. One of the two, right?
And that's so one of the things that's come out of this, what I feel like has gone on is like people who are living with grizzly bears feel like they can't talk to anybody, feel like the media doesn't want to hear from them, feel like, the public at large does not want to hear from them. And so people are so frustrated that they just lose their mind online, as opposed to just being like, here's my experience and here's what I think. Yeah. They're just like, you're a left wing, whatever, or you're a right wing, whatever, or you're this or you're that. It's like, hey, because we end up having to shut our comments down on a bunch of these issues like CWD, Interior Fraser Steelhead. We just have to close the comments because people lose the plot. And it's like, hey, you should be able to add alt online too, right? Like I would love it if we could have thoughtful discussions. They don't need to be long-winded, but like, why does this occur? Or here's been my experience with grizzly bears, right? that's okay to talk about. But when you come on and like with the wolf thing, like smoke a pack a day, like, come on, folks, this is first of all, it doesn't represent the community's, beliefs, I don't think.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not going to reflect well on the hunting community or conservation either. I mean, you shut people down. Like when you go off the deep end, people's ears close. And their blood pressure goes up, and now you're not going to get the opportunity to convince them or engage them on anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Good comment, Mike. It's absolutely.
Well, Jesse, I always appreciate your time, man. And there's a million other things we could talk about. We should probably line up another one sometime when things calm down a little bit for you. I know you've been crazy busy, but always good to chat with you, man. And I appreciate your time.
You bet. Likewise. Congrats on the hunting season.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. There you go, episode 191, Jesse Zeman. At the beginning there, you heard me briefly mention fire. Jesse and his family lost their home in the fires that came through here 2 years ago, the big fires. And I really want to pick his brain more about fires in British Columbia and forest management and all that. So that's what that was about. And happy to hear that he's back on the property. He's back in a new home there. And yeah, man, so many people were impacted by that fire, and fire will continue to impact people in the province and around the world. So I do want to have Jesse back at some point to chat about that. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I hope you learned something from it. I think the key takeaway here is to be a better storyteller, to be mindful of what you post and how you represent yourself and the hunting community and the public. So be mindful of that when you're posting, when you're commenting, when you're putting out videos. People are actually looking for ammunition to use against us, and sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And that's the reason why we don't post a whole lot on Instagram. We feel like it's better to just tell the story here and let you know when episodes are available, and you can hear it all here. So anyways, that's enough out of me. I really enjoyed talking to Jesse. I always do. And look forward to having him back on the show at some point. But anyways, we shall hopefully see you guys next week with another episode. Cheers.